to you. And as we know, that is when officers intervened at the property. I hate to say it, but I told you that this story would get much worse in detail. And if you already think that Damien is a twisted man, well, unfortunately, I have more terrible news. You see, Damien was not one to hide from the truth. In fact, he seemed to be quite confident when openly confessing that he'd murdered an entire family to officers. And with his partner being pregnant with his baby at the time of murdering her, he would then cheekily ask with a grin on his face if technically he'd murdered 4 people or 5. Moving into the legal proceedings of this case, Damien would make his first appearance at Derby Crown Court only 6 days later, that being on September the 24th, 2021. Fast forward 15 months to December the 21st, 2022, he was found guilty on 4 counts of murder and 1 count of sexual assault. As a result, Damien Bendel was sentenced to a whole life term, meaning under no circumstances will he ever be released from prison. It is important to note here that whole life sentences are extremely rare in court of law and are only given to the most vile of criminals. Whole life sentences are only ever applied when there is a belief that there is no chance that the accused would ever be rehabilitated. And while this sounds like a relatively sensible and reasonable option to the average citizen, this sentence is often legally challenged. But what was most surprising about this case was the results of an inquest that reviewed the probation system and whether any failings or faults had occurred in the process. The inquest concluded that there were 51 distinct failures which played a role in Damien
I think it could just go down.
outside of prison and permitted to reside at Terry's and her children's home. And despite previous allegations of an inappropriate relationship with a 16-year-old foster care girl, this information was inaccurately recorded and not reported during his probation assessment. Even more concerning, when Damien, who was mandated to wear an electronic tag, openly expressed a threat to kill his partner and children if the relationship soured, the officer responsible for tagging him chose not to report it. Had this information been known, he would have almost definitely been prohibited from staying at the same address. Another significant contributing factor was misclassifying his risk level as medium instead of the accurate high. If adequately assessed, his suspended sentence for arson in May of 2020 would have likely led to incarceration, thus preventing him from crossing paths with Terry and averting the tragic events. Probation officers who were involved in these oversights would reveal that they were severely overworked and understaffed. And during the inquest, they attributed their challenges to the lack of experienced colleagues in the office due to COVID-19. But worryingly, they would also admit to only reviewing 2 out of the 10 available background reports on Damien. As a result, one of those officers involved in the process lost their jobs due to, quote, gross misconduct. And although Terry, John Paul, Lacey and Connie were the real victims of this case, it was their loved ones that felt the burden. Terry's parents, Angela and Lawrence, expressed seething statements when this inquest was finally made public. In a letter, they said, "The probation service failed to protect and keep our family safe. They are now gone. This must never happen again. For many years, they have been failing women and children at risk from violent men with a history of domestic abuse." The senior coroner for Derby also commented on the probation service's weak attempt to blame COVID-19 for their failings. In his own statement, he said, "They don't explain the totality of the acts or omissions or failures of the probation service's overview and supervision of Damien Bendel and the decisions made."
Holy crap.
The probation service acknowledged that they fell short along every
Let's
step
go!
and stage of the process, and pledged that they would review
Oh my
and repair
God.
their categorically broken system. In addition to this, they were also provided additional funding to the annual tune of £155 million to help improve their service. And this was under the sole condition that they tighten up their infrastructure and train officers to
Oh my
apply
God.
caliber. But sadly, as we all know, it is too little too late for our 4 victims. And
Oh
although
my
their
God.
deaths may prevent additional ones in the future, this tragedy never should have happened in the first place. Following a service at St. John's
Wait, how many
Church,
attempts?
Terry Harris was laid to
2,125.
2021. 2 white horses solemnly pulled her coffin, adorned in the colours of her cherished West Ham. Remembered by her family and friends as a kind woman known for her generous smile,
I don't
Terry
think-
was
yeah.
a
Oh,
devoted and
100%.
caring mother and a compassionate care worker who went above